Wilson Miles from Black Film TV. Hello, folks. How's it going?
I will
Hi,
see.
hi.
It's an interesting series. I was talking to the creators in terms of like, is this a modern day version of Minority Report without the sci-fi? And
Yeah.
he gave me this whole technical jargon breakdown. I was like, okay, what would it to say yes to take you on this project? I'm gonna start off with you, Kate.
Uh, well, I was lucky because Brian Tyree was already attached to the project when I was sent the first couple episodes to read. And I was already a huge fan of his, and I was able to read these scripts with him in mind. And my character was really well written, and I was excited to explore where that was going to go. And I was also really intrigued by my character's relationship with Brian's character as well, and to sort of see how that was going to unfold throughout the series.
Brian?
For me, it was, the writing I thought was just very smart. It was also a really interesting look at like what it's like to be at Quantico. This is a whole other thing that if you're interested in the FBI, that's going to be an aspect of the show that you'll really enjoy. And like Kate said too, for me, it was the cast. I came in pretty late in the process, and I, saw all those names come up on the audition, people that were already attached to the project. And I was like, whoa. I mean, that's a classy group of people. How do I get involved in that? So that was a big pull for me.
What about you, Seppi?
There were many things that sort of lured me into wanting to do this. Things that both Kate and Brian have mentioned, but for me, it was taking a look at how, these decisions that we make in our lives, early in our lives, and how that sort of manifests throughout our lives. And that's the joy of being able to play any human being throughout various points in their life. You get to kind of reflect on your own and go deeper into their lives, the things that drives them, the things that make them tick and think and feel. And so I just thought it was a beautiful character exploration, and at the same time exploring bigger themes. Like with my character, she brings the tech element to the criminal justice system because she thinks she can make a flawed system even better. She comes from one oppressive, flawed family timeline history in Iran, which is why her family had to flee, which is also very resonant for me and my own backstory. But and she's trying to take this sort of correct the injustices that her family experienced, that people in the United States experience, and use tech for the betterment of society and criminal justice. And the way that it sort of spirals out, it's taken out of her hands and corrupted by those in power, and ultimately spins out of control in the way that AI does. It's sort of a haunting sort of window into what could be and what is right now.
Each of you have had done your share projects, whether it be TV or film, but for this one, was there boot camp involved in terms of going through the training like real FBI people? And if not, did you have to do your own research as far as what these guys go through? Kate?
Luckily we did have we had a mini actors boot camp. The very first time all of us met in person was at this boot camp, where
the running test.
Yeah.
We did the fit test. That first, oh my God, I threw up. Do you remember?
Oh no, I forgot about that. That is so funny. Oh, now I remember. Yeah, we took it seriously, as we should have. But it was interesting because we all met on the very first fitness training day, and everyone had their kind of specific dynamic, which I think kind of stuck throughout the 7 months of shooting. Brian Tyree is hilarious, and he was immediately like the jokester, cracking jokes and just like the biggest smile on his face. And but yeah, it was a great bonding experience from the second we all met. And then of course we actually had a couple weeks of training before we started filming. So the physical training, of course, is really important, and we worked with our stunt team to do all of that. There was, driving, there was stunt driving involved as well, which was really fun. What else am I forgetting, you guys?
Weapons training, physical training, like self-defense.
To handcuff people.
Yeah.
But Brian, you talk about you throw up. So did you not get the assignment? Did you not know what you were prepared for?
I mean, I thought I was. Maybe it's the thing that I share maybe the most with Lennix that kind of came out in that situation was like, I so badly wanted to like excel. And so I think I pushed myself just a little bit too much on the running portion of it and lost my breakfast. But I felt a lot better afterwards. And but it's funny. I mean, it's a hard fit test, and I thought I was in good shape, and I didn't pass it.
Having spanned 2 decades within this series, which one of the three of you thinks that they aged the best?
You're gonna have to tell us. You're gonna have to tell us.
Yeah,
I know.
you tell us.
Did any one of you have to go through extra makeup, in order to look older?
I mean, everyone kind of had their version, and it was quite a process finding what was right. It took us a while to sort of land on, what is right for how do each of these characters age, based on the life that they've had, based on their genetic background, based on, where they've come from. So these are all conversations that we had at length.
And it's also because it's in the future, think about all of the stuff that people do today to keep themselves looking young. If you then fast forward however many years, I can't really even imagine what people will be doing then to try and stay young. Or will people care as much? There's so many questions that I think you have to ask yourself.
Technology is constantly changing. What we knew 10 years ago is totally like, old now, as they say, because there's something new always coming up. When you do a show like this, you have a new appreciation for the FBI with what they got to go through in order to secure a safe place for all of us to live in.
Yeah, I would say, especially right now, you see like the FBI is the new boogeyman of the far right. I mean, like they're even like talking about, one of Donald Trump's things that he wants to do is to completely get rid of the FBI. And I think, having, I was part of a small group that actually got to go to Quantico as part of like research for this. And that really gave me a lot of appreciation for the really difficult job that they do. And also the way that they really have to balance the politics, especially in an environment right now where there's a whole political party that like literally wants to wipe the FBI out. And so that's I think my appreciation for the FBI definitely went up a bit.
Seppi, how tech savvy were you prior to the series?
Not at all. I'm still not tech savvy at all. But actually that was something that I found most appealing about I mean, besides the other things that I've mentioned, was that I just don't think my relationship to the world is so different from Or's. And I related to her emotionally so deeply. And so in order for me to kind of get in her mindset, it's not like I guess I could take classes, but I didn't have the time or the interest really. I'll leave that to Or. But I did read this book by Arthur I. Miller called The Artist and the Machine. And he talks a lot about AI generated art and the history of AI and sort of the artist's relationship to technology and computers. So that was a way for me to sort of wiggle my way in to the way Or sees and processes, because it's a whole other world that I can't even begin to, I mean, I can imagine clearly, but it's just so hard to think like, I mean, it's a totally different way of relating to the world and to work than I do. But like I said, the emotional life and the sort of primal elements of who she is are deeply relatable.
Well, congrats on the series. I had a hard time trying to remember everybody's name because it's not Jane or John or Tom. And our, like last names that sometimes people go with. So keep it cool, keep it going. I'll be interested to see how it goes week by week. So have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Black from TV. Hello, folks. How's it going?
Great.
So Tom, I want to address this to you first. As I watched this series, I felt like I was watching a more updated version of, but longer, Minority Report, but spread out. You tell me how you wanted to break this down, which is not Minority Report.
Well, it's interesting. Minority Report, which I love the movie, love the book, or short story rather. What's interesting is they had to come up with a kind of very, I don't know how you would say it, kind of fantastical way of predicting crime, which is they have these, what are they called, prefabs, these visions, those three, they're in the kind of bath and it's all kind of mystical because they couldn't ground it. It was a brilliant premise, but they couldn't ground it. The truth is now we have that, and we have it in the technology, which is if you look at enough data, you can start to see patterns. So it was like you could rip out all of the science fiction element and ground it in reality. So you can now do that story without having to make it, 50 years in the future or whatever. And that was really appealing because then it comes out of the fact that you're looking at it and not as, you're looking at those three timelines and you're not saying this third timeline, the future timeline is a completely different genre, science fiction genre. It's all knitted together. And it's all in the realm of possibility. And actually, when we started work on it right at the beginning, it did feel a little bit theoretical. And now we're in this world of ChatGPT and Bing and looking at the possibility of AGI right now, which is something people were thinking was going to be 30 years in the future, and realizing it's not science fiction at all. And so that just became very exciting because then what you can have is you can have the character create it like in Minority Report. The person who created that system isn't really integral to the story. Tom Cruise is kind of a cog in the machine, whereas we have the person at the center of our show, played by Brian Tyree Henry, who implements it. And it was really interesting to do the implementation rather than just the consequences of that.
Jessica, we're talking three timelines here. You can get confused at times as far as where you're going with this. What's the premise of having three timelines? Is it more to establish the characters to see where they're going forward as opposed to just having a scene or two where they're describing what they did in the past?
For the impetus of it, I need to defer to Tom, but I would say in the realization of it, I think for us, one of the real guiding principles was just making sure we always stayed very close to character and sort of their grounded reality. And those relationships, those friendships over 25 years from something that, you don't have to have gone to Quantico to be able to relate to the experience of a class, being part of a class, and those relationships over time and how they change and how they track across three specific timelines. And so I think being able to really make sure our characters and those relationships were credible, and then having fun with the, for the kind of puzzle box narrative of it, so that those timelines were always in dialogue with each other. They weren't just randomly tracking, but really saying something, really commenting on one another, and sort of whether in a kind of aesthetic relationship to one another, or just sometimes very subtle ways that they're commenting on what's happening in the other timeline.
Joe, it's good to see you. Obviously, now we can talk about something other than Black Panther. What led you to take on this project and getting behind the director's chair?
Tom's scripts, his first few scripts, I read them, and I really found them fascinating in the way that he approached the institution of the FBI, and the idea of changing institution from inside, and the idea that it's from a character's point of view, and people, each of these very interesting characters are bringing their past life experiences to Quantico and to their job, and actually seeing how that affects the institution and how the institution affects and changes them as well, and that dynamic, and then tying that, like layering that with the idea of genre. And there's lots of genre moments that interplay with the character moments, and I found all of that really, really fascinating. One thing I did want to say in your question to Jessica also, it's great to see characters go through things. Then you become more rooted to the emotion of what they're going through, oftentimes, than hearing them talk about it. So like that idea of having those timelines so you're present to experience those moments versus to have the conversation about those moments. And so I think that's one of the great things about the three timelines as well.
We've seen shows about FBI, Criminal Minds, Quantico, and so forth. Tom, how much research did you go into the FBI and its analysis? So anybody who's been watching this stuff, or for those who have an idea about what the FBI is about, and I get some fictionalized tale about it.
We were really fortunate in the sense that we had great source material, which is Jerry Williams's podcast where she interviews retired FBI agents. But we also she was a consultant on the show, and she's written a book actually about, I think it's called something like Myths and Misconceptions. And it's about comparing fictional representations to reality. And one of the interesting things about the timelines that we could do is that most FBI cases are extremely complicated and take a long time. And they're very laborious and in terms of crunching information. And so the way TV is often works is it just compresses all of that, and in 1 week a case is solved and another case next week, and that just doesn't happen at all. And we didn't have to follow that format in this show. We were able to show the cases really, these people had, Poet has spent 3 years undercover, 4 years undercover. Teo has been going after someone for multiple years before the case is broken. And because of the way the show is structured, we can jump in right at the point of action and not have to say it all happened within this kind of short time frame. So that enabled us to be closer to the truth. Also, because of the time structure, we didn't have to kind of crank Quantico into a drama. We could just take the really small emotional moment that's really relevant and add it to an episode rather than build an entire episode around it. Because, Quantico I find really interesting and really fascinating. And one of the things I think Joe was mentioning is seeing it roots us to the FBI agent. Often when you watch a show with an FBI agent, you kind of take them as a kind of almost like a fictional device. But once you see them in a classroom with a book and they're kind of worried about who to date and they're in a kind of small dorm, you realize, oh, I did that at college, or I know that story. So you're able to kind of track through. They have a kind of reality about them that is three-dimensional. And then, as I said, on a kind of practical level, we had agents, or retired agents, on set all the time. And Joe could consult with them, I could consult with them, anyone could just go up and say, listen, what are the... I would be more about story and character, but they were there on, technical stuff, like how people walked, how people held guns, how people entered doors. So we were really interested in all of that because I think the premise was we want to concentrate on the agents and the truth of it, rather than the kind of TV tropes.
Speaking regarding TV tropes, every time I do these interviews, I always say there's a glut in the market right now. We have so many programs, whether it's streaming services, cable network, or if you choose to go to the theaters. It's a question now of marketing the show and getting people hooked on to what's going to take to get these people to watch the show weekly, Jessica, because, at any given time, whether the show's good or bad, it's a matter of letting people know, because one show ends, whether it's 4 episodes or 10 episodes, the next week there's something new, so we want people to talk about the show and get engaged. And that all goes into the first few episodes to whether or not there's enough in there to attract them outside of the names of Brian Tyree Henry and Kate Maurer and anybody else you may know. What do you think, Kate? Jessica?
Yeah, to me, I think from the first episode, what I hope really jumps off the screen is just how this show leans into the unexpected, how we sort of invoke those tropes of the law enforcement genre, of the AI, of the science fiction. We touch on all those genres, but then we quickly turn them on their heads and we lean in on character and relationships that we hopefully that we've all found so riveting to follow. And so I think that's something that viewers will really spark to.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, obviously, it's a good. I'm impressed from what I've seen so far. Congratulations on the series. Let's keep going to see where it ends. That's a good thing about weekly series, is it keeps you fascinated to see where is this going. So, congrats to you all.